Okay, I think everyone here knows that Rice opened for classes on September 23, 1912. But that was not the real formal opening that Edgar Odell Lovett had planned for months in advance. He had sold the board on the idea of having a grand international convocation, 3 days long. And what he wanted to do, he wanted to use this occasion to announce to the world the ambitions of this new university. Not just simply the opening of it, but to lay out a vision of a place that he had extremely ambitious dreams about. Months in advance, scholars all over the world, the Moscow Academy of Science, libraries, learning societies, got in the mail a shellacked wooden tube. And they opened this tube up, and in this tube, printed on lambskin, was a formal invitation. The president and the trustees of the Rice Institute of Liberal and Technical Learning invite you to the formal opening. And then rolled up was a sort of a paper copy of the program. About 1,400 copies of this invitation were sent out. People, of course, had never heard of the Rice Institute. They may have never even heard of Texas. But here came this really unprecedented invitation that just by the grandeur suggested this was certainly going to be a special place. And sure enough, people all over the world came. Lovett had invited a number of extremely distinguished speakers, Nobel Prize winners, for example, and scholars from Rome and from Paris and from Berlin and from London and Tokyo. The New York Times said it was a galaxy of savants seldom seen in the United States. And along with those extremely special guests were about 200 academic leaders from the United States, deans and presidents and provosts of all the major universities. And they came here for 3 days, and as I said, October 10, 11, 12, 1912, for a series of concerts, for symposia, for addresses. Lovett gave his famous talk, The Meaning of the New Institution, that Saturday, October 12. And then after his talk, they all got on a chartered train, went to Galveston, had what was called a shore supper, spent the night in the brand new Galvez Hotel. The next morning, rode the chartered train back to Houston for a citywide religious ceremony celebrating the new institution. No one had ever seen such grandeur. Here was the program that people got, bound in calfskin, with the university seal embossed. And then throughout, beautiful printing. There are engravings of the university buildings. Here, for example, it says Will Rice College. It wasn't called that then, but this is now Will Rice College. And there are diagrams of the university plan. Again, people had never seen such elegance. And I know from the letters that people wrote back to Lovett that they were incredibly impressed. Over and over and over again, people said from all over the world they had never seen such a grand celebration. As I've said several times, they didn't have in their vocabulary boggled. But if they had, you can tell that whatever one of them meant was they were absolutely boggled by this occasion. And the highlight of that great event was Lovett's talk, The Meaning of the New Institution, on Saturday, October 12th. It's about 80 pages printed. He didn't say that much. But in that speech, Lovett laid out his vision for what this university should be. And as you know, the Rice Charter is an extremely sort of thin document that doesn't mention the word university or college and doesn't say much about what the university is supposed to be. Lovett is the person who took that charter, and as I like to say, breathed life, breathed magic, breathed sort of ambition into it. And in his talk, he laid out a vision of what this university should be. He first said that there would be no upper limits to our educational endeavor. That's a quote you've heard a lot of times. And here on October 12th, he said, like Columbus, we're setting out on a voyage of discovery. And this is a new country. This is a small city. No one in this part of the nation had seen a great university. But he says, we're like an infant. But that I think we can see in the bones and the sinews of this institution the makings of a giant, academic giant. And one day we'll take our role on the stage of the great universities of the world. He laid out a whole series of things that the university would do. And one of my favorite phrases, he said, faculty here would have the privileges of research and the pleasures of teaching. That is, from the very beginning, unlike a lot of college universities then that only taught, research would be central to the role of Rice, but research and teaching hand in hand. He talked about the university having an honor system and student self-government. He talked about establishing a college system. He talked about the idea that students of all ages and faculty would live and learn together on the campus. He talked about eventually having professional schools in what he called all the brain-working professions of our time. He talked about beautiful architecture. He talked about what he called the best faculty wherever they can be found. I mean, it was an amazingly ambitious program. Again, here in a tiny town of about 80,000, on a campus of 300 acres that were almost treeless, beyond the paved roads, Lovett laid out a vision that would be a great university. After this event was over, Lovett had 1,400 copies of the program printed in 3 magnificent volumes called the Book of the Opening. And then he mailed over 1,000 copies of this 3-volume Book of the Opening to academic leaders and libraries and scholarly societies all over the world, instantly putting Rice on the map. I mean, imagine how bold this was. This is October. It could have been 99 degrees. There could have been a hurricane. There could have been a 14-inch rain. What a gamble he took. And it worked. I mean, amazingly, a cold front came through. The sky was blue, like the Mediterranean, and the humidity fell, and it was refreshingly cool. And people were just amazed. I mean, everything went perfectly. Lovett's vision and how he handled that convocation of the opening instantly established Rice as a first-rate university. In 1918, after World War I, when the British educational group came to the United States to persuade Americans that henceforth you should send your students to England, not to Germany, the only institution of higher education west of the Mississippi that they came to was Rice. The French delegation came the same year. That was the power, and I think the vision, of that formal opening ceremony. And then in 1962, some of you, if you're as old as me, might remember that. You may have been a student here. Rice in 1962, on October 10, 11, 12, celebrated what we then call the Semicentennial. And in some ways, it mirrored, to a degree, what had happened in 1912. There were a series of symposia all year long. And out of those symposia came 13 books. This is one of the books, this is the one in Southern history, called The Idea of the South. And they were all published in uniform format by the University of Chicago Press. 13 really important symposia turned into 13 books. On those 3 days, October 10, 11, 12, there was again a sort of a galaxy of savants, as in 1912, who came to Rice to give talks. People like Margaret Mead, Alan Nevins, Maurice Ewing, Jacob Viner. And if you were a student, you can remember in Grand Hall, Margaret Mead walking in with a big shepherd stick and pounding on the floor and giving her talk. And these famous scholars had lunches in the college. And they asked students to participate in robing these delegates for the big event. If you participated in the robing of the delegates, you got a beautiful little medallion. Rice University Semicentennial Medallion. And on the back it says, participant. It doesn't say I just helped put on robes. I mean, I can sort of look at this and say, I was the participant. But I mean, every student got a sense of belonging to this. It was a major event. And then after this series of very famous speakers, everybody on campus, students and faculty, were bused down to the music hall, which no longer exists downtown. And there in the air-conditioned comfort, we heard Arnold Toynbee give sort of the keynote address. And then all the key talks were published in a book called Men, Science, Learning, and Education. That's a beautiful series of lectures by extremely eminent people, all given at Rice in that centennial. And Kathleen and I both like the final sentence of the introduction. One may wonder how these matters will appear to the distinguished lecturers for the Centennial Academic Festival of Rice University in October 2012. Well, that's what we're getting ready to do. We are now getting ready to celebrate our centennial. And we don't intend to try to exactly mirror the events of 1912. It would be impossible. But we're using the event of 1912 as the inspiration for what we hope to do here. And at this series of events, October 10, 11, 12, 2012, we certainly want to celebrate what Rice has accomplished in its first century. But just as much, we want to do as we did in 1912, we want to announce a series of bold ideas and a vision and ambition for our next century. Now, we've been marking this celebration since 2008. January 18, 1908 is the day that Edgar Odell Lovett formally accepted the presidency of Rice. So in 2008, we had a series of talks and so forth celebrating the coming of Edgar Odell Lovett. And then in 2009, and 2010, and 2011, we are marking on campus and elsewhere key historical events, the 50th anniversary of a variety of things. We celebrated last week or so, I think the 40th anniversary of the opening of Valhalla. So even though we had anniversaries of Rice Stadium and studies in English literature and Bierbach, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Bucky Boles. So we are trying to have a series of historical events sort of ramping up to 2012, creating a sense of excitement about what's happened at Rice. And in 2012, again, we're going to have symposia, we're going to have famous keynote speakers, we're going to have concert with a special music commission for Rice, we're going to have exhibitions, we're publishing a series of books, biographies of Lovett and Captain Baker and William Morris Rice. We'll have a pictorial history of Rice, we'll have a scholarly history of Rice. We hope to have kind of a zeitgeist book that sort of tries to capture in images what Rice is like today. In my mind, but I'm biased here, but in my mind, the highlight of the Centennial will be on October 12, 2012, the 100th anniversary of Dr. Lovett's giving his great talk, The Meaning of the New Institution, and on that day, we will unveil and dedicate a statue to Edgar Odell Lovett on campus, and President Lieberman will give a talk. So again, what we want to do in 2012 is that we want to sort of capture the excitement and the ambition and the grandeur and the boldness that Lovett laid out in 1912. This is a big event. It takes a lot of planning. We're going to have to hope for good weather. And we think, though, that we're going to be able to have a celebration that everyone will be proud of and really will show that its inspiration was that amazing event in 1912. And we solicit your ideas. We particularly want you to get involved in what we're doing, to keep informed, and to help spread the news that Rice is in the process of celebrating its 100th anniversary. It will culminate in the year 2012 with really special events in the fall of that year. So I invite you to stay tuned, stay attention, help us spread the news, and we may later on have things that we'll be asking for volunteers for. We don't really know. We're not that far along. But we are absolutely dedicated to having a celebration in 2012 that lives up in terms of vision and grandeur and sort of class what that opening convocation did in 1912. Thanks very much.